Welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo Sanders, and we're so happy that you could join us today for a little poetry. For those of you who may be tuning into our show for the first time, my husband Robert and I run an independent press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box, and we publish about 25 to 30 poetry books per year. You know, it's always been our goal to help our authors reach the broadest audience possible, and which is why we started hosting the Poetry Box Live a few years ago. That and the pandemic. We love the way that this online forum lets people come together from across the globe to experience our talented poets, some of whom they might not otherwise have a chance to hear. And we've got a great show for you today, featuring three very talented poets. We have Emily Newberry joining us from right here in Portland, Oregon. We have Genevieve Lardizabal, a young poet joining us from Seattle, Washington, and Teddy Norris sharing poetry from St. Charles, Missouri. So let's get started with our first featured poet. Emily Newberry is the author of Signs, her new chapbook that John Sibley Williams called compelling, elegant, and remarkably honest. Emily is a writer, speaker, and thought partner living in Portland, Oregon. She was born in the Midwest during World War II and grew up on the East Coast during the rebellion against oppression. Since coming out as a transgender woman, Emily has delighted in this experiment we call life. In addition to writing and speaking, she is an amateur radio operator. Her tagline is, "I help other people shine." She is fascinated by the way we dance with vulnerability as our lives intersect, and how the rich diversity of life and the many paths we take somehow seem to lead us all home. Please welcome Emily Newberry.
Thank you so much, Shawn. Thank you really for the gift of this forum. It's just so innovative and wonderful. And thank you everyone for showing up today. It's just delightful to have so many people listening to your poetry. In preparing for this reading, I'm once again learning the deep places for me that these poems come from. As always, as I prepare to do a reading, the poems themselves blossom once again in ways they didn't when I first typed them on the computer. And I hope that in some way they also blossom for you today. So this one is called Awake. In the interval between the blessed lies of sleep and gentle self-deception of early morning plans, you are a water jug. The last drops of yesterday safely passed through dry mouth. You are chatter, suspended, awaiting the pull of old doubts. You are the first beams scattered through surprise cracks before dawn fades into the busy. I have a 6-word story for my life. It goes like this. Baby cries, girl silenced, woman stings. And this poem is called A Child's Dream. Awakened, I cry exquisitely as the grave questions my existence. If given half the chance, I would walk then, even if alone, up 10,000 stairs to the last room where I would sit as still as death, waiting for a baby's first breath, and breathe deeper than my eyes can see. Now, I don't know about you, but I believe we can see ourselves in nature. And sometimes I wonder what nature can see in us. This poem is called Take a Look at Sand Dunes. How the shore becomes anvil, where ocean hammers out lines on your bones until you float with the driftwood. How waves measure your shadow before throwing a fresh seaweed shirt on your biography. How moonbeams write reverse curve storylines now washed from your life without a hint of irony. How soft things crawl around in hard-edged regrets, eating the leftovers of your careless walk. Thank you. Now, I don't know about you, but with all the experiences in my life, I know that at different times I can be both whole and broken, and each one has a special meaning for me. This poem is called Broken. I am broken by the words, the music, telling my story, our story of being lost, shredded by our shadows. I am broken. My mind tears me into stanzas, paragraphs, or chapters, each one a cry to be seen. I give up in despair, close the book. Surprised, I hear the notes of resurrection calling me home. So I love nature. I used to backpack when I grew up back east, and love to do it. And at times, nature also challenges me. This one is called Grumbling. I don't like winter. This matted cover crunches underfoot. This ice-choked stream freezes ripples into dead stories. This memory of yellow crunches rather than bends. This wind I shiver against. Until spring, when I plant the next seed. Remember the winter I needed to be reborn. My childhood home was a very challenging place for me, between hiding the fact that my dad had divorced my mother, the beatings from my stepmother, and the discrimination we faced because my dad was an agnostic and we had to hide in the Unitarian Church. The pressures of being a transgender girl and trying desperately to hide almost killed me. But my dad gave me certain manual labor to do, chopping wood and mowing the grass and picking apples. And that was part of what helped me to get through it all. I left as soon as I could. But when my parents sold their home, when it was empty, waiting the new owners to move in, I actually thought about going back home a couple of times and walking through the place to see if I could resurrect some of the positive out of the negative. This is called Echoes from a Wooden Table. After cold breakfasts on bare wooden tables, clean but for crumbs of conversation, after sweaty arms pick apples branch by branch to store in boxes like old stories, after warm breezes paint memories on silent trees, walk once again through bare rooms, whisper sweet nothings, to light every corner with dreams of cinnamon breakfasts and work well done. Now, I have to admit, there are times I wish I could go back and do some things differently than I had done them in the beginning. I don't know if that's true for you, but this poem is called Time Travel. Imagine you are two going somewhere. Imagine time travel has rules. 1, there will be no food for thought. 2, you must sit on your memories. 3, your ticket will punch you if you laugh. 4, looking forward will take you back. 5, before disembarking, you must correctly answer this question. When the one at the beginning meets the one at the end, what will you do? So I did try to commit suicide when I was 17 years old. At that time, I didn't think I had any choice. Today, I've lived a long and happy life. Woman sings, and I do sing. And I know I have a choice. And one of my choices is I want to die under the best of circumstances. When sun rays crack the space where branches herd breezes, when rabbits turn a wary eye to libel the first leaf, I want to die then. I want to have my last breath sting about lips inches from a kiss, babies poking through bloody legs, and poems aching to flow from pens. When the earth warms under midday sun and flowers turn to bathe in full light, when sparrows argue over worms and perching spots, I want to die then. I want my body arms wide to welcome a building's first brick, to shield new ideas from cynic sneer, to welcome ant and worm to the feast of decay I become. When the owl's silent talons grab the first evening meal, when shadows play, when the owl's silent talons grab the first evening meal, when shadows play before darkness steals their stage, when closings become opening lines in nature's play, I want to die then. I want my clouding eyes to close the chapter on pain. My lips become the blue of sky, and skin the gray of wisdom. Thank you.
Emily, I'm blown away. I've read these poems so many times, working on your book, but hearing you bring them to life, what a treat. What a treat for the ear, for the heart. One of the things I noticed about this collection is that, these poems are short, but you pack so much heart, so much wisdom into such an economy of words, which really speaks to your mastery of the craft. Mm. And I think it was Annie Lightheart who said when she was blurbing your book, put this truth-telling book in your pocket. You'll want to keep these poems close. And I can't agree more. I want to thank you for sharing these beautiful gems with us today. And I have to say, these poems certainly blossomed for me. And I think a lot of people. It's beautiful. Next up, we have a young, courageous author sharing her struggles and triumphs through her poetry. Genevieve Lardizabal, author of A Starved Heart, is an 18-year-old poet from Seattle, Washington. As a young girl, she was diagnosed with having anorexia nervosa, purge disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, and major depression. During and after treatment for these conditions, she expressed herself through writing poetry. This led to her being featured as one of Washington's best emerging young poets of 2019. Genevieve's dreams of is becoming a therapist to help those with eating disorders and also to teach kids how to write through their pain, whether through poetry, storytelling, songwriting, or journaling. So please welcome Genevieve Lardizabal.
I just wanted to start off by saying a big thanks to Shawn and your husband at the Poetry Box. I mean, I would not be here today. I would not be speaking here today if it wasn't for you. And so I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity. I started writing at 14 while I was in treatment for all of those disorders. And because of my resistance and recovery, I was put onto room-based care, which is basically where I stayed in my room for 5 months, and I was not allowed to converse with others, go outside, or do much of anything besides read, write, and go to meals. So I found poetry. Without an outlet, it would have been completely debilitating. So reading and writing saved me in a way. Throughout my book, A Starved Heart, which I spent 4 years pouring myself into, I explore the social, cultural, and gender normalities, while as well provide insight into a treatment from a child's perspective. My first poem is called 2017 to 2018. It is also the first poem in my book, and it details the first year of my with being diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. Why was it that when boys made fat jokes, they roamed in packs, and that their words didn't roll off their tongues, but instead rose into howls? It was May when I heard it for the first time, vicious snarls of the word fat, rolling out Liz, Catherine, Anna, Beth. Her stomach looks like a balloon. How can she walk? The mirror glowered at me, morphing into more than just a reflection. Even the size of my pinky finger started to gnaw at me. The list of girls they spit out must have had my name on the top in big, bold letters. In June, my mind was being strangled by tape measures and drowned in Diet Coke. Endless laps, whistles still rang in my ears, even miles from the pool. I ran even when my legs started to wobble in the hot sun and my lungs begged for rest. I told myself it was worth it. I would stop when I got there. But the chase of skinny never ends when you don't know what you truly look like. I asked my mom under the August sun, why can I see numbers floating up the straw every time I take a sip? She brushed it off. Because how can you admit to yourself that your baby is sick? October struck heavy on my weakening figure. It was Halloween. My friends sat in the kitchen, carrots and hummus spilling out of their mouths. I sat in my hollow room, tears spilling down my funeral dress. I can't eat, Mom. She promised to get me help, but at this point I was submerged. November began with my name hanging under anorexia nervosa. The doctors told me I can no longer swim. You will faint. And I scoffed in their faces. I am fine. 2 days later, whistles went in and out of my hearing as I sunk to the bottom. All I could hear were faint yells swirling around my limp body. It is now January 23rd, 13 days after my 13th birthday. My legs crossed on the hospital bed. Vigorously, thoughts swirl in my weak mind, but one question keeps shouting at me, gluing itself to the back of my eyes and forcing its way into the thick of my brain. Over and over it asks, why did you give those boys so much power? Thank you. The next one is from the second chapter of my book, Anger. I go into stages of emotions that I felt within my 3 years of treatment. At first, it was fear, and I was terrified, and so I held onto my disorder like it was a security blanket. But the second year, I was angry, and I pushed against all support, looking at them as roadblocks. This poem is when I went to Denver Children's Hospital. They gave me headphones with no wires, and I walked to the window outside the emergency room and watched the sun set its wings down below the oak tree. I remember feeling jealous of the girls who sat in gray Hondas that rushed by. They didn't have the heavy feeling that weighs down their chest or the indents in their arms from locked strips on a stretcher. Earlier, they asked me if I could go onto the stretcher myself. I remember saying I thought I was good at hiding it. And one tall nurse looked into my eyes and said, "Honey, you do not have to have a bullet hole on your forehead for us to be able to know that you need help." And I screamed, running barefoot down the hall while they trampled onto me, pulling my arms behind my shoulders and strapping them to a blue stretcher. It has been 5 months since I was allowed to go outside. The air was so damp and dense that I felt I could stick my spoon into it and shove it down my throat. A lot of questions were asked. Do you want anything to eat? Do you know where you are? How old are you? Do you commit to staying alive if we send you back? Their questions felt like threats, hanging my future above my head. When will it be my turn to make my own choices? I drew with yellow crayons on pieces of paper and cried to songs that bombarded my ears through wireless headphones. When they released me, we walked through the intensive care unit. Flashes of bloody orange stretchers, neck braces, and breathing tubes. They expected me to be happy, like I was given bright gold balloons. But even the next morning, when I woke up in a brown love seat, I clutched to my chest and could feel the emergency room bed leaning up against my spine. It's not like it ever had an ending, but just stuck like syrup on my palms. The next one is from my 3rd chapter, Depression. The interesting thing about depression and my experience with it is that, yes, it was the most debilitating emotion, I guess you could say. And at the same time, it opened my pathway to success. Because when I was afraid, like I said before, I held on to my disorder because I needed something that gave me a false sense of safety. And when I was angry, I pushed against everyone. But when I was depressed, I was in such pain that I started to realize how much pain I was put in and how my disorder was not helping me in any way get through that pain and move forward. It was just causing me to fall deeper and deeper into my disorder and my near-death experiences. So I'm really grateful that I got to feel the deep pain of depression because it's given me the gift of happiness and joy. This next poem is called Treatment Cycle. I went to treatment for the first time when I was 13. I remember how my family got up at 6 a.m., not really waking from anything because none of us slept that night. The road was quiet, like raindrops could hit and no sound would come out of each puddle. It was at the point where the sun couldn't wave to us because its arm was lazily held behind each mountain, slowly rising. I often wished I could rise like the sun, slowly and steadily reaching with each arm, but I jolt when I wake. My arms freeze, and when I stand with a blanket cape, my head almost always kisses the floor from the blackness that covers my eyes. When I arrived, people typed aggressively and stared at each person who rang the doorbell with a perfect smile. The camera stared me down. The doors closed heavily. The staff watched when I would stand for too long. My head felt heavy on the pillow. All I wanted to do was sleep, and nothing in the world could make me. I sat in my wheelchair all day and watched them force yellow tubes down my nose. I was 13, the age where most girls get their periods and get their first phone and have a birthday party where boys are invited. I was 13. But I watched winter turn to spring. I watched the snow melt and thaw on each branch. I watched my eyes lighten with the sun. I watched the cherry blossoms start to flourish, and I thought to myself, I am okay. But I was moving with season, not recovery. I feel like that's a nice poem to read as we're entering spring. You know, it's a little dark, but it is kind of a spring poem. The last one is from my last chapter, Redemption. I am so grateful that I was able to recover. And if I didn't recover, I would not have a book published. I would not be speaking in front of everyone. And so I'm grateful to the gift of recovery, the gift of food, the gift of life. It's brought me everything. And when I was 12, I was a completely different person. So this is a letter to my 12-year-old self. Some days, the noise of me breathing is enough to wake you. Your face stamped in red ink in my memory. I can almost feel your cold hands and see you look up at me, even with empty arms. Things changed so drastically about you, but I always noticed the same brown eyes that once was looking up at a mom in a bundle of pink cotton blankets. I wish I could sing to you and try to pour light through your ears to stop the gunshot, bloodied sounds that rattle your mind. I can still hear you cry, And sometimes when tears fall from my cheeks, they create a pathway for us to swim in, for us to be connected. And amidst the pool of tears, I would show you the 4-year-old you with a glowing smile and perfect little arms and ask you, why hurt her? She does not deserve to be starved. I know it's hard to hear me amongst the shouting of your mind, but I promise you, the shipwreck will be homed by colorful fish, and the wildfires chasing you day and night will stop burning and collapse into the sun. Ashes sticking to you at first, but then allowing grass to sprout and flowers curling around your laying body. You thought for so long that only others can save you, but you are the only one who can save yourself. And the scared bluebird you are will rise from the nest as a bald eagle, soaring across the mountains you peaked and the oceans you swam. I never got to say it, but I love you, not because of the gap in your thighs or your slender shoulders, but because you are a part of me and always will be. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this opportunity.
Genevieve, thank you so much for that. You've been through so much and you're so young. I just have to commend you on your courage to share these very intimate poems. I know too well how this type of writing can be both healing and cathartic, but also be very scary to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it's writers like you who are willing to be vulnerable that really help pave the way for others to heal, either by reading your poems or by being inspired to bravely pick up the pen themselves. And so I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. I'm so glad that poetry saved you and that you got the help that you needed. And we wish you nothing but great success in your continued recovery and your journey forward. I'm excited to see what you do in this poetry world and beyond.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot to me.
You bet. And our final poet today is Teddy Norris, author of In Transit, which explores the unique ways in which we traverse the timeline of our lives. Teddy is a poet and retired professor of English who holds an MLA from Washington University in St. Louis. She has taught composition, poetry, and creative writing for 2 decades, and for 8 years served as a regional judge for Poetry Out Loud. Her writing has received awards from the St. Louis Poetry Center, the Springfield Writers Guild, and the Missouri Writers Exchange. For Teddy, writing poetry is where she can both lose and find herself. When she reads a poem with the beauty and power to cause her heart to soar or to feel it stop, it reaffirms that no matter the effort required to create poetry, it is work worth doing. Work she is grateful to be able to do. Please welcome Teddy Norris.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening for supporting poetry. I'm always honored to read with other poets, and I too want to thank the Poetry Box for this opportunity. Publishing poetry isn't easy for poets or for small presses, and so I'm grateful to Shawn and to Robert for all they do to help us get our work into print and for making beautiful books that we can share. It's a cliche to refer to our life as a journey, of course, but we are all in transit. When I chose the title for this book, I thought, will people think about buses and planes and trains or something? But it just felt like, these are poems about how we move through our lives. And it's sometimes a strange trip. It's not without its dangers and its risks, but it can also be surprising and wonderful. So I'm going to open with the first poem in the collection, one that's special to me because it reminds me of the first vacation that my husband and I took together out west in the summer in a car without air conditioning and black interior. What were we thinking, right? But we were young and could do things, like sleep in a tent then, and it was a great trip. So this is Benediction for Newlyweds. Newly married, nearly broke, they headed west, left green and humid hills behind, and drove their no-frills car for days through swimming heat until, like beached, exhausted fish, They gaped at the canyon's grandeur through a heat-fevered haze. They were the dust on their papery skin. Their bodies held the desert heat like asphalt after dark. Sand settled in their shoes. They drank warm beer, dreamed waterfalls and snow. Then, as they crawled a treacherous stretch of road against a landscape robed in brown, the green eruption startled them. Aspens, shimmering, gilt-edged with sun. They stopped the car to drink the dappled view. The dust the tires raised up was blasphemous. And then, with water from their worn canteen, they washed their hands before they touched the leaves. I think we've probably all had that experience of driving for too long late at night, and the white lines start to sort of mess with our mind a little bit, right? So this one suggests something maybe a little bit more than that. Night vision. Late into the Louisiana night, her eyes witched by white lines and reflectors. In the breathing dark, she thinks perhaps she'll wake him, suggest they rest a while. Overhead, the trees have arched their long, unnatural arms. Their limbs drip silvery moss, reach across to others of their kind. She wonders whether up ahead, just beyond the headlights' reach, the lines that mark the roadside's edge converge, suspects that on each side there's a dropping away where nothing begins again. And she's dead certain that the great black Escher serpent bends itself back. But there's no stopping now. Knowing how he feels about delays, she blinks, refocuses, grips the wheel. I like to work with memory and time in my writing, the way we travel back and forth, living in the present and the past and sometimes the future. I find that interesting. My mother died shortly before the pandemic, which was a great blessing, actually. And in her last years, she did a lot of time traveling. This is My Mother Visits Another Country. Grown up, twice married before I left familiar soil, I fell hard for the charms of different lands. Discovery was delicious, time and money my only constraints. Travel still tempts me, though I'm more cautious now. The comforts of the known have their own siren call. My mother never ventured far from where she was born, never traveled by train, boat, or plane. Now at 92, she's taken to the open road. As if to make up for lost time, these days, she's scarcely ever at home. Her trips take little time, no tiresome waits in airports, no traffic jams. She's there before you know she's gone. Even my most exotic trips cannot compare to hers. Old friends she visits have been gone for years. Constrained by neither calendars nor clocks, these people and their places remain strangely unchanged. My mother never owned a bike, and yet she claims today she covered 60 miles on her Harley, insists that Dad was along for the ride. Mostly she enjoys these adventures, though I'm often at a loss to follow her itinerary. Tomorrow, she'll be off again, bright-eyed and brave, visiting places I have yet to see. Even if we're completely grounded in the present reality, we still have those experiences where someone from our past pays our memory or our dreams an unexpected visit, right? The title of this one, They Come Back, serves as the first line of the poem. They come back, unbidden, in the labyrinth of dreams, appearing suddenly like extras on a movie set, then slipping off again. Ronnie, high school heartbreaker, with his chip-tooth smile, his fall of dark hair, and his beloved sister Beth, so broken after the crash. History class and Mr. Harris, with the hands that sometimes misbehave. The swimming coach, whose post-practice offer of a ride home we quickly learned to decline. That collie mix who couldn't switch allegiance when college summoned that fall. What happened to that faithful dog? Faces from the neighborhood who watched us growing into people they no longer recognized. Faces much the same until one day they weren't there. Like lost mementos rediscovered in a move, old photos refocusing the past, a puzzle from high on a shelf poured from its box, random pieces slipping into place. Traveling isn't without risks for animals or for humans, and I wanted this poem to serve as a metaphor for people in transit from a place of danger. So many today looking for safety, trying to get to a better place. The risk. The doe lies in the road, her legs angled like pickup sticks. The fawn standing frozen, mere feet from the shoulder. Clenched with frantic questions, I pull over, wondering what to do, who I should call. The little one is so small. Could it survive on its own? Is there a buck close by? Reflexively, I snap a photo with my cell, documenting it's what we do, but the image is already preserved. I Google animal control, watch where the baby bolts into the brush as I approach the mother's body. I try to imagine how hunger, pitiless pursuit, could tip the scale, make such risk-taking seem the safest course. Why not stay hidden, keep her precious young one within the boundaries of the known? And why did she not sense the danger from the hot-breathed beasts hurtling by? Did she dare dream no hunters would look for them on the other side? Thus her desperate decision before panic's paralysis. The hit has been recent, the body almost as warm as my child when I've read him his last story for the night. Heavier than I expected as I drag her body off the road and into the ditch. By tonight, it will be stiff, cold. I wonder if the young one is still nearby, hidden in the trees, waiting for me to leave, waiting to cross. The whole pandemic experience caused time to sort of telescope for me. I don't know about you. And even now, I still don't feel I have a very tight grip on whether something happened before, during, or after that period of time. So much was in transit, so much lost. This poem speaks to some of the losses, small and large, that resulted from COVID. Disappearances in the time of COVID. The recipe, one I rarely made, called for dry mustard, barely a spoonful, but there was none in the pantry. 3 masked trips to grocers, but none on the shelves. Everyone out, no one knew why, only that orders had not been filled. The bread yeast shortage made sense. In the pandemic, we'd all become bakers extraordinaire, and toilet paper hoarding was yesterday's news. But why dry mustard, this seldom used spice? Another absence, something else gone missing. Out there, somewhere. They disappear, perhaps to return one day soon, or not. Buffet lines, deli food samples, a favorite snack cracker or scented soap, facials, sips from communion cups, handshakes and kisses on the cheek, faces behind windows, voices on the phone. January again, month of things to do, or not. Closets emptied, books reread and given away. Calendars with days and days to fill, still too many days gone. Empty bank accounts, tables without food, empty chairs, missing smiles, missing faces, empty hearts, engines running on empty, without enough breath. Above, the pulsing cosmos. Below, the ceaseless march across the centuries. Enduring mystery of the cradle and its contents, of things appearing, disappearing. Tiny diorama balanced atop a blue orb that spins and spins beneath an infinite firmament. Out there, the question lingers, its sting peppery on the tongue. These poems have been a little bit somber. My writers group could tell you I don't write a lot of Susie Sunshine poems, but I'll close with this one, which I think has a hopeful tone. And in case the word might be unfamiliar, redux means brought back or revived. Starshine redux. The stars, those many splendored deceivers, pulse in the womb of the night, and watching, I wonder, will the future's calendar keepers, those careful measurers of dark and light, look up and mark my glow? Will they know that this post-pyrotechnic piece of dust once drifted, cold and dark, to blaze again with breath and then return to ash? That I too once dazzled before I dimmed, my energy arriving after me like a long delayed prophet. To them and all whose gaze may lift toward the past, I say, I will gleam again. Look for me, one more little night liar, winking there in the dark well of sky, as if I might hold the answer. Thank you all so very much for being here and for sharing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Teddy. You said, you don't always write about light topics or whatever, but I really love the way you tackle tough topics and envelop them in such beautiful imagery and language. Like the way you approached your mother's dementia and brought kind of a lighter side to it, or even painting the loss. Then we had so much loss during the pandemic, and it was just so overwhelming. But to focus on this one minute ingredient, dry mustard, and kind of grow from there, I just thought was a really lovely way to kind of capsulize the whole experience that we all shared. And the way you write about these tough topics really kind of seems to help us, face these inevitable truths on this journey we call life. So I really enjoy the way you kind of play with that. And I have to say, on a personal note, it's been really fun getting to publish a poet from my hometown of St. Louis, and to find all these little connections with some of the detailed imagery and settings of your poems. That's been a real treat for me. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for sharing these beautiful stories with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, let's have a giant round of applause for all of our readers today. I want to thank all three of our very talented poets, And thank you, our audience, for joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. It really does mean the world to us that you joined us on Zoom to share in this beautiful art form we call poetry. We will be taking a break for April. There's going to be lots of other events going on, and so there's plenty of things to keep everybody busy with poetry, but we will be back with another show on Saturday, May 13th. And our featured poets in May will be all from the Pacific Northwest this time. We'll have Lana Hechtman Ayers of Newport, Oregon, Susan Johnson of Roslyn, Washington, and Joel Sevajinsky of Seattle, Washington. So keep up to date on upcoming shows, new releases, submission opportunities. Please subscribe to our newsletter by going to thepoetrybox.com, where you'll find a sign-up form at the bottom of each webpage. On March 16th, we'll be open again for general manuscript submissions, so you can find all the details on our website. So thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more poetry with you next time on the Poetry Box Live.
Thank you to all of my family that came and watched me. It means a lot to me, especially those in the Philippines. I mean, that is amazing. I am very grateful. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And to my friends who came as well, to everybody, thank you. These audiences mean so much to us poets, that our words actually be heard by people. So thank you.
And thank you for everyone who tuned in on a Saturday evening in the Midwest. It's dinner time. So thank you for spending your time with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I would just add, while there are many accomplished poets out there in the world, not many of them are accomplished as readers of poetry, including their own poetry. And I think the three people we heard from today really just did an incredible, emphatic job of conveying what they had on paper in a very, very different medium. So thank you for that.
I have to second that for sure. I mean, it's one thing, it's always lovely to read a book of poetry and really you reread the stanza and get something new out of it each time you maybe read it or whatever. But there's something magical about when it comes to life, when you get to hear it from the poet's voice. And that's part of the reason why we love to do this, because we get to share this, we get to post the videos on our website, and everybody gets to watch it and relive it. And it's just wonderful. So bravo.
That is such a gift, Shawn. Thank you.
And all of you, as everybody's a gift who joined us today. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your weekend, and we'll see you in May. Okay.